I think the first place to start is just giving a background. Remember, for a long time, there was no new investment being done in the real estate market. The number of buildings that were coming up, particularly in the commercial area, were very, very few. And it was even much worse in the residential area. Very little new developments. And yet population was growing, middle class was growing, not to the extent that it's growing now, but there was still a good level of middle class. Where were they living? Where were they working? Where were they shopping? Things like that. But over time, since I think the early 2000s, we have seen the economy really transforming. GDP growth growing much faster than it used to grow before. When that happens, you find that government is starting to deploy a lot more cash in the infrastructure areas, particularly in suburban regions. And when that happens, then it means that areas start getting improved in terms of accessibility. And as areas start getting improved, people start looking at opportunities to go and build their own homes in those new areas, because now they can access their workplaces and schools and hospitals much easier. So over the last, I would say 15 years, we've seen significant growth in middle class group in Kenya and in Africa generally. And so what that has meant is that it has put a lot more pressure on demand for units, demand for commercial, demand for residential, and so on and so forth. So it means, therefore, that whatever pent-up demand was there needed to be filled up. That's how the property development then started growing much faster. New developers come into the market to develop all sorts of things.
To fill the gap.
To fill the gap. Yeah. So there was a lot of gap before, but that gap continues to increase on an annual basis. Government statistics have it that we have about 150,000 houses required every year, and we're only able to deliver between 30 and 35,000 every year. Now, that's already demand being created, and yet the previous demand had not been been fully sorted out. So over time, a lot new units have come into the market, particularly in the middle income group and in the high income group. And there are some people who might say some of those sectors have now been very well covered, but there are other sectors that are completely still not covered. So if you look at the low income area, for example, we still have huge requirements there. There are still certain fundamental problems in that group as far as the financing models are concerned, but the demand is still there, and there are people out there who are still looking for units and who can afford to buy units, but they don't have enough units to buy. In the middle income group, I think that we're starting to see a bit of overheating, because if you go through Kilimani or Kileleshwa, you find on every gate generally you'll find to let or for sale on every gate. That gives you a semblance of the situation that is in the market, particularly in that particular sector. In the high income, we still have houses that are being sold for 90 million, 80 million, and people snap them up. So they still demand in that space, and I can see that a lot of developers have continued to move on in that particular area. So if you have to structure out the market, so you have the high income, middle income, and low income, and each one of the areas have different demand variables and also different supply variables. But I think it's important to look at these markets, but also keep in mind the finance market, because the finance market supports how units are being taken up. Now, we've had situations where interest rates have been very, very high. So to a large extent, you might have capacity to buy, but you don't have access to affordable credit to be able to buy. So that keeps you out of the market, even though you can afford. But then you have situations where, as the market has changed from an interest rate perspective, you hope that down the road we'll have more people able to access credit at affordable rates to buy the units. We are still yet to see, I think the jury is still out in the market to see how the new interest rate regime affects the property market. I believe that we will see a much positive growth trajectory as far as mortgages are concerned. But remember that even at the point when it was considered low risk, and therefore you could lend out more money. We still ended up with just 25,000 mortgages. Now, when prices have come down to 14%, it does not mean that the risk has changed significantly. In fact, the risk for the bank has changed more significantly, because now they are pricing their loans lower, but their base of investment on loans is going to be much smaller. Maybe in my view.
Will increase.
The uptake might increase, but you price based on risk, not necessarily just uptake. And so I see a situation where the bigger banks that have bigger balance sheets taking a bigger advantage, because then they can take that lower interest rate and spread it over a much bigger portfolio and make money. But the smaller, medium-sized banks, I think, will continue to see difficulties. We want to go back to what our original vision was, which is homes for all. We wanted to make sure that we can support creation of well-designed, dignified communities, not just in Kenya, but in the rest of Africa. That's really what we were set up to do. So a lot of the projects that we have done initially, we did to raise resources, not necessarily to meet with our vision. So now, as we are building the change process, and we are now coming out of a situation that we were in, we're getting the new capital, we want to focus on affordable houses. We want to focus on delivering number of units, that we can house as many people as possible, provide the right kind of communities around Africa, and I think more importantly, provide the kind of financing structures that were not there before, that can help people buy units over time. So in 10 years, we would like, God willing, to deliver as many units as possible. Our target in our minds is an audacious goal of 1 million units, that we can deliver 1 million units in 10 years. I think it's possible, but I think obviously it will take a lot more work and a lot more faith to make sure that happens.